Hi, this is PubShorts, the episodic series brought to you by Enago and Trinka, where we discuss the latest developments in the field, in the news cycle of related to academia and language technology. My name is Dr. KK. I'm the Innovation Officer at Trinka and Enago, and I have with me Tony O'Rourke. Tony, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, KK. I'm very well. Yes, I'm Tony O'Rourke. I'm Vice President here for partnerships at Enago, and I also look after the commercialization of Thinker, which is our AI universe for editing, content support, content development.
Excellent. So, Tony, excited about talking about all sorts of games being played by different people, and that's
Listen,
why.
the great thing about this podcast, KK, is that this is now, I think, episode 11, and I'm always amazed at the number of new stories there are to discuss, but meaningful stories that have an impact.
Yes, and this episode is episode 11, so that's a significant landmark, right? We're past 10, and it's titled "The Game," and the game is played between different actors, bad and good, in the field of academia, and it is a reference to the song by the band Motorhead. That is the best that I could come up with. Tony, are you familiar with the song? I think that...
of course.
Okay.
Although when I first saw the title, I thought you were referring to the Queen song.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Maybe I should have specified. So anyway, it is a very popular song for the in the world of professional wrestling. I think that's what you also mentioned. But anyway, I like Motorhead and the way. Yeah. So anyway, let's get to the first article. So let me start sharing my screen. So this article has a title that I would like you to read out. Tony, would you do the honors?
Not having learnt Latin at school, but I believe it's Quis, custodiet, ipsos, custodes. Who will watch the Watchmen?
Yes, so this is an archive research paper on detecting AI-generated peer reviews using LLM, such as GPT-4, the OpenAI model. So the researchers talk about two models, which are named token frequency. It is a dense article, but there are a couple of articles, and Tony, I think you already mentioned that these are dense from your point of view.
Very much so.
Yeah. So two models, one is called token frequency and the other one review regeneration. So the former, that is a token frequency model, detects patterns in AI generated content, while the latter regenerates the reviews and compares them with the original review text. Basically, it tries to sort of emulate or recreate the review and sees if an LLM is able to create similar text patterns. Now, the reason why we are using it, as in we are talking about this, is because researchers should not technically be using LLMs to do peer reviews to get out of their own responsibility of doing the reviews themselves. Now, the researchers mentioned that there's a defense mechanism called synonym reversion that reverts paraphrased words to their original form, and this could improve the review regeneration model in the sense that it could detect people who have tried to paraphrase and sort of get out of the fact that they did not do the review themselves. So, Tony, this is a step forward in the right direction in terms of maybe checking whether bad actors have used or played the game of using LLMs. But do you have any further thoughts on this?
The only comment I have to say is that it doesn't surprise me that there is this kind of research taking place, that these kinds of models are being developed. Right. There is such pressure on reviewers now to review papers that anything that's going to help them to achieve their review objectives, I think that can do it ethically and soundly and constructively and positively, professionally, has got to be a positive thing. I think we're still in the development stage.
Yeah, I mean, this episode will have a lot of peer review, and the next one is also an article which I think, Tony, this is the one that you were referring to, the Asimov Press one. It is titled "A Defense of Peer Review." It is a deep analysis of the history, the benefits, the defects of peer review with some suggestions. So these are my notes. So Tony, what I took away from the article is that the suggestions were to have open peer review, dedicated statistical reviewers, and automation, which is what everybody is talking about. We are talking about that. And there is an interesting point regarding a critique of peer review, that it's formalizing academic language and expression. Basically, Tony, the article states that because we have structured peer review, because people are expected to follow certain rules and guidelines and regulations, everybody is sort of sounding the same. And that is a criticism for academic output itself. So your thoughts on this?
Maybe I have the advantage of being a native English speaker. I don't particularly feel that. The great thing about good peer review and good scientific writing is that it should be unambiguous. There should be no sort of doubt in terms of what the author means. And if something's written formally, like and something's written well, there's no ambiguity. So I think, although I understand, for a non-native English speaker, it can create challenges and problems, and that's why people like us exist, to help them. I still think there's a role to play.
Yeah. So my counter argument to the argument that the author has made is that, science is methodologically rigorous, and there is a sort of way in which you have to do scientific experiments. Generally science, I'm talking about science and equating science to all of research. And from that point of view, even the peer review should also technically have a structure, and it might lead to, let's say, roboticization or more consistency than you would like, but at the same time that establishes some sort of a quality standard so that people can measure science on the base.
But don't you think peer review has a structure now? I've been involved in academic publishing for a long time. Good peer review has structure.
Not all peer reviews are
not all.
Yeah. So there are some. I think Elsevier is the leader in this front, as in they have questions that let's say original research article peer reviewers are supposed to follow, and is some examples. I mean, not all journals mandate this, and I guess from the article's point of view or the author's point of view, it creates that roboticity, the monotonous nature of the comments, but at the same time it upholds the quality. And now talking about the quality of peer review itself, okay, but Tony,
I'm just gonna say, for those of you who haven't read this article, I found this one of the best articles I've read in a long time in terms of just understanding how peer review has evolved. So I would urge everyone to read this article if you have an interest in peer review. It's a very good article.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that it is from Asimov Press. I'm a big Isaac Asimov fan, and I'm just restarted reading the Foundation series.
Good books. And they're not a bad TV series, are they?
Well, I have different thoughts on the TV series, but I love the books, but we'll talk about that in another episode maybe. So we are talking about another peer review related article. This is titled Assisting ICLR, that is International Conference on Learning Representations. This is something new that I learned after I got into the world of AI and machine learning and peer review. And basically ICLR 2025, the conference, it will offer assistance for reviewers with feedback on the comments that the peer reviewers insert. So basically ICLR, as I explained, it is a leading sort of conference for machine learning in the context of peer review. So what they are offering is that they are offering AI based feedback for the reviewer comments, and this is because there's a lot of articles, as this is a common thing across the spectrum in the world of academia, and it offers optional feedback to reviewers, and this will not replace reviewers but provides feedback, and the feedback the things that are being provided feedback for would be reviewer language in terms of tone, content, and specificity, and also what is a safe option to sort of start the process of peer review in terms of you can at least improve the quality and the tone of the content is what this article seems to suggest. At least, if not, let AIs do peer reviews or assist peer reviewers. So I thought it was a very good starting point for peer review automation, considering the volume, challenges. Tony, what did you think of it?
I know conferences have come under quite a lot of scrutiny in the recent years with retractions, particularly. And concerns around the quality of contents being created for conferences. So, I think anything that's going to support the reviewer is a good thing. I think one of the things that's often missing is reviewer feedback. Publishers giving or organizations that are providing peer review, providing constructive feedback to those reviewers. A lot of it's down to resource. Who's going to provide those reviews, and who's going to review the reviewers? Right. And going back to the first article.
Yeah. So this one, the reviewer comment, this is a good example. Instead of just stating that this paper could use more experimental baselines, what could you elaborate on it would be the feedback that is given to the peer reviewer. And from my point of view, in the sense, when I do workshops for authors to deal with peer review, I talk about how authors should respond to the peer reviewers' comments. Yeah. And in that, it is very similar, as in you have to elaborate. You cannot be vague, point to the exact source that we are talking about or where the revision was made, etc. And this is on the same lines, but as feedback for the review. So I think it's a positive step. If you do not have any thoughts on this, Tony, I'll move on to the most dense paper that I think we both have covered in this. It is an archive paper. Which title?
This is probably the densest paper we've covered in the 11 episodes so far.
Yes, and with so many more dense papers to come, considering the way.
And I say dense in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah. So deep transfer learning based peer review aggregation and meta review generation for scientific articles. That's a mouthful. But Tony,
what's a meta review?
Yeah,
tell me what a meta review is.
So meta review is a summarization of peer review findings. You can imagine a journal editor, when they go through the different peer reviewer comments, they'll have to still sort of summarize and synthesize their own sort of summary, right? That is a meta review. And and this paper is on a successful better than previously AI deep learning framework for meta review generations, and the authors use BERT, or which is expanded to bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, which is a useful I guess technique. Like last time when we talked about RAG, it is another way to improve the accuracy. So I'm not going to the details of it, just that the model that they are suggesting outperform traditional methods. And it simplified the process of meta review generation. Now, this is particularly relevant, Tony, in the context of preprints and preprint servers, because when there is open community-based peer review, if you have a meta review generator which is accurate, then it is very easy for somebody who's taking a look at the paper, the preprint, and to eventually arrive at the right conclusion. Your thoughts?
I have no thoughts. So I'm still not sure I understand what a meta review is, but yes. No, good.
Do you understand what a meta-analysis is?
Yes.
So imagine instead of in meta-analysis, you look at different research papers. Instead of those research papers are the thing being analyzed, you look at different reviews. That's the best way to sort of.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, again, I mean, the challenge we all publishers have nowadays is finding reviewers and making it easy as possible to find reviewers. And if you've got a tool that can summarize reviews and make it easier to understand what's coming out, then I think it's gonna help everyone concerned.
Right. Moving on to the next peer review article. It is Predicting the Future. It is a Wiley online library editorial written by Mark Rosenfield. So I'll just summarize what Mark is trying to say. He highlights the concerns over a potential reviewer shortage, which Tony, you just mentioned. And he suggests solutions such as paying the reviewers, compensating the reviewers, or integrating AI, and the importance of sustaining or having peer review despite its flaws. We've talked about peer review's flaws, and I have not double checked it, but he projects doubling of submissions every 15 years. That sounds very bad, because I don't think the human population or the reviewer population would double every 15 years. And obviously he mentioned paying the reviewers, compensating the reviewers, or limiting revision rounds. Now that's an interesting point. Traditionally, peer reviews are expected to be done by more than one individual. And he also suggests training programs for young, early career researchers. Now, that was an interesting thing. So the counter argument to having early career researchers, or ECRs, as peer reviewers is that they are not quite peers, because they are still developing in their careers. And it does not address the fundamental problem, which is the excessive volume. So it's a mixed sort of an article, but I came away with some interesting thoughts, and I was alarmed by the volume increase.
I applaud the efforts of this editor, who's clearly experiencing difficulty, who must be experiencing difficulty in getting good reviewers, consistently finding good reviewers. So and he's been trying to be imaginative and creative in exploring different ways of encouraging
Tony, you cut out for a second there. Can you say something?
I'm so sorry. Yes,
that's fine.
I seem to have a bandwidth problem. I was saying that I applaud the efforts of this editor. He clearly has experienced challenges in trying to identify and get good reviewers.
Right.
Looking at different ways to bring on reviewers on board is a good thing.
Right. Now, let's move on to a couple of articles or news articles on research integrity. This is from Nature News, titled Journals with High Rates of Suspicious Papers Flagged by Science Integrity Startup. So this is something new. This startup is called Argos, and it's from Cytility. It is a news article on the findings by this article. So it is this article, sorry, this I guess, the new app or startup is similar to Clear Skies and Signals. These are research integrity sort of leaders. And so I have a bar chart I'll show you quickly. So it has flagged over 40,000 high risk and 180,000 medium risk papers across publishers and journals. And, Tony, let's talk about that directly. I think this is what these are the articles that we are talking about. I'll zoom in a little. So basically these are the journals at risks from high risk article and the percentage of retraction. The bars indicate the percentage. In the first part of the graph, it is as per volumes, the percentage of portfolio that are determined as high risk articles by Argos, and the number of retracted articles. So the way that I looked at it is that if suppose the high risk articles, the number of high risk articles is much higher than the number of retracted articles, then there is a worry. There is potentially a lot of, let's say, poor quality research still not being retracted and still people considering it as high quality. I'll let you speak about this. So any thoughts on this?
I'd like to understand what their definitions are in terms of what determines high risk, what determines, medium risk. I don't fully appreciate, I understand the importance of trying to predict future retractions, but I'd like to understand the methodology a bit more.
So I do not think this article itself gives you the exact methodology, but Argos seems to give papers a risk score. And a high risk score suggests that a paper is worth investigating. And it relies on it. What the article says that Argos relies on open data sources like Retraction Watch and author networks with histories of misconduct. So I guess it puts a lot of sort of signals and it generates a score. Let's assume that the score is accurate. But if again, assuming it is accurate, so is there a concern among these journals, or is something jumping out at you, Tony?
Oh, well, I mean, if I were a publisher for these journals, the first thing I'd be trying to do is to validate these findings. Mm-hmm. I'll ask my editorial teams and actually go back to Cytility to ask them to explain, right, how they reach these conclusions. I think if this is the case, if this is actually accurate, yes, it is a concern, because what it's saying is that these journals are not retracting enough papers, or not retracting enough papers quickly enough.
Well, PLOS One on the other hand has more retractions than the percentage of portfolio.
Okay, that's an exception.
Yeah, right. And if you look at the share of portfolio, there is a sort of you can see that the places like mathematical, as in I guess what is it? Journals like mathematical problems in engineering, and I suppose molecular medicine reports, these have a high amount of retractions. Now that's another worry. Now, all I have to say is that it is a good thing that there are many research integrity, let's say, applications that flag this. But obviously, we have to go deeper and find out what is it that why are these things happening so frequently, and eventually find a solution permanent solution for it is what I want to say. But anyway, moving on. The next one is it is an exclusive. So this is, one second, let me see if I have the right. Yeah, so this is exclusive. The papers that most, is this what we just went through? Yeah, I think this is what we went through. Sorry about that. So I want to go to this one, eLife. This is a Retraction Watch article. It is titled eLife Latest in a String of Major Journals Put on Hold from Web of Science. Now, this is a slightly dated article in the sense that eLife is already, the impact factor has been withdrawn as per the this week's news cycle. So I'm going to read my quick notes related to this. So the proposed strategy by eLife, I mean, Tony, I'll ask you to talk more about it, is that eLife thinks that there needs to be a different sort of a publishing model, and it is up to the public or the reader to determine what is good and what is not. So basically, it does not have 100% peer review is what I understand from this. And for the ones that require peer review, it charges an APC. Is that right, Tony? My understanding is right?
My understanding of their business model is that it will publish anything that the editors forward for peer review. So I don't know what the criteria is for the editors to select papers, but they have like a number of criteria which they then apply for those papers. And I tell you what my concern about this is, and I think, I understand why Clarivate needs to has a set of rules and expects those journals to abide by those rules in order to have a uniformity and a standard for where they sense. What it kind of also does is that it stifles creativity, it stifles innovation a little bit, and that, as science is growing, the amount of science output is growing, there've got to be more creative ways to provide peer review. And, I think what eLife was doing is interesting, is really quite informative, and leading to sort of broader community peer review. And maybe the metric organizations like Clarivate and others need to find ways of addressing that and bring that in.
And, I picked up this article through Journalology. Our friend James Butcher, it's his newsletter, and he had an interesting analogy where he basically compared, let's say, peer review or journal published articles like a supermarket. So when you walk into a supermarket, the products on the shelves have a certain level of quality, and that's what a sort of a journal output or published, an articles published by a journal have that sort of a stamp of quality. And when eLife does this, it does not have that. So I think it's a valid analogy, and I was moved by that. No,
it is an interesting analogy. I think, if there's one thing over anything else that a journal should be able to give to a piece of scientific content, it's that kite mark, it's that stamp of approval.
Right. So I guess there's positives and negatives to such changes. But anyway, we'll move on to the next one. This is
just sorry, before we forget, I wonder who's going to be next.
Well, Curious, Helion, and lots of people are already under the radar, right? In terms of,
we don't need to go into who they are, but I think there are going to be others that will be highlighted moving forward.
Right. Okay, cool. So the second last item, but this is the last sort of big story. We have one quick hit. So this is a story from Retraction Watch. It is titled "Reflecting on Research Misconduct. What's next for the watcher community," which is related to the first paper that we talked about. So the author, Daryl Chubin, is an independent consultant, but he was a former federal staff and a founding director of the American Association for Advancement of Science Center and Advancing Science and Engineering Capacity. So he's got a federal sort of a scientific position in the US, so he's retired. Now he critiques for-profit publishing models as well as open access models. For research quality and integrity, the triad of stakeholders he mentioned, publishers, editors, and federal agencies, are competing against each other in ways that sort of harm science, is his argument. And he writes about the future of research integrity watchers and argues for broader policies spanning disciplines, and asks that the watcher community, that is, people who are working voluntarily for places like the Retraction Watch, to support better practices across disciplines. Now, this is a deep sort of a thought. I'll let you speak. What came on your mind when you read this, Tony?
What came in mind is, here's somebody who understands the process, who spent his entire life working in this particular process, and appreciates the challenges that every part of that triad, the publisher, the editor, federal agencies, are all facing. And there've got to be new ways for these organizations to collaborate.
All right, you cut off at the end. I think you finished your thought, so I'll go on to the last. This is a quick hit. This is an interesting story from experimentalhistory.com. It is again from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is from Journalology. It is titled "The Rise and Fall of Peer Review." So this is an alternative thought post by experimentalhistory.com. The writer is Adam Mastroianni, if I'm not mistaken, is an experimental.
Mastroianni,
yeah. Okay, there you go. You sound like an Italian now. You could.
I'm half Italian.
Oh, I see. Interesting. He's an experimental psychologist, and he has been featured in New York Times, The Atlantic, and the NPR. So he's a big shot. So he critiques peer review, and he argues for not having peer review. Instead, he recommends open public feedback. Now, I'm not too happy with that, but at the same time, it's an interesting thought piece, alternative thought piece. So what did you find it interesting, Tony?
No, yeah, I found it interesting, but I also found it concerning, and really, de-emphasizes all that. Look, let's cut to the chase regarding this whole episode. Is that Peer review, we know peer review is flawed. Peer review as a process has its flaws, has its errors. But come on, there probably isn't at the moment anything better.
Yeah, right.
And if there's an alternative approach, then those alternative approaches need to be working together with the existing processes.
Right. I mean, we talked about the flaws of peer review, I think 4 episodes ago, and you
did.
Yeah, and it was a nice infographic. But that brings us to the end of this PubShorts episode 11, the game. Tony, I believe you went for a gig last week. How was it? And explain to us what you felt.
If you insist. So I love going to concerts. I went to see an American jazz guitarist called Pat Metheny, who's been playing jazz guitar for over 50 years. His first album came out in 1976, and it was a solo guitar show. It was just him on the stage. But he has a range of different guitars. He has loops, which are interesting, but he also has this thing called the orchestrion, where he can effectively accompany himself with percussion instruments. They're all powered by MIDI devices on his guitars. It was very, very entertaining.
Have you ever experimented with a looper?
I have, yeah. I've got a couple of loop stations, yeah.
I see. I've done a couple of gigs. In fact, you wouldn't believe it. I actually routed my... I play the percussion instruments as well. So sometimes I play the guitar and I have to hold a percussion groove. So I connected my mic off the cajon that I was playing into the looper's input, and I played the entire song. So it was fun.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Most of mine tend to be sort of guitar and bass, but yeah.
Okay. So do you do vocal looping as well along with your guitar looping?
Oh, you haven't heard me sing. No.
I have heard you sing in our production meetings and you sound great. Anyway.
I haven't tried that yet.
All right. So, Tony, if somebody were to, find us on YouTube or LinkedIn and they are interested in knowing more about, let's say, you, Enago, Trinka, how can they find out about us and PubShorts?
As you say, both KK and I are on LinkedIn. You can just search for Tony O'Rourke and you'll find me, or you can write to me at tonyo@enago.com. And I really encourage watchers of these podcasts to come up with ideas and suggestions for future topics.
Yep. And you can find me on LinkedIn, as Tony said, also on X, which a lot of researchers and academia are migrating out of, which I think we are covering in another episode. So I'm still on X, not very active. And let us know whatever you want us to cover or whatever different formats you would like for us to sort of try. And so that brings us to the end of the episode. This is once again PubShorts, and on behalf of everyone who helps us bringing out this content, and for Tony, this is Dr. KK signing off for PubShorts episode 11, the game. Tony, bye-bye. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.